I am Mary Fox Murray. I'm the daughter of Chaplain George Lansing Fox.
Growing as a child.
And I really don't know very much about my father's childhood. He was born in Pennsylvania, but they moved to Staten Island, New York, and he grew up there. He might have been unhappy, I don't know, but he wanted to join the service early, and he joined when he was 17.
And
During World War I, he was a medic, and he was sent over to France, and he saved the lives of many people. He took one French captain and carried him off the battlefield, because he was badly injured, and he saved the captain's life. And so he was given the Croix de Guerre of France. Later on, he saved a lot more, and he was given the Palm for the Croix de Guerre. He did, but really not a tremendous amount. He was a very humble person, and he loved to help people. He spent a lot of his time going all around the neighborhood, helping people find food, clothes, jobs, anything to help people. He was very devoted to God and God's service.
Talk about what injuries he sustained during World War I.
Yes, I can. As a medic, he was in every single French battle, and then toward the end, there was a hospital filled with our servicemen. There was shelling all around, and he was going into that hospital, bringing people out so that they wouldn't be hurt any more than they'd already been hurt, and it was bombed. He had his back broken in about 8 places. He spent years trying to have his back where it should be. So that was a great amount of his aftertime.
Mention his back situation at all?
Yes, in the beginning, when I was growing up, he would have pain in his back, and he would try to fix it himself, doing all sorts of exercises. You should see all the things he did, moving all around. And by the time he went back into service for World War II, he was fine. Well, my mother was a nurse, or she was studying to be a nurse, and she fell on a patient in the hospital she was in Boston. And so they told her that would be enough. She didn't have to be a nurse anymore. So she went out to Moody Bible Institute, and my father was out there studying, and that's where they met.
Your play between your parents?
Well, in the beginning, she thought he was being kind of silly. He would watch her and wanted to meet her and wanted to take walks with her and go to different places. And in the beginning, she wasn't that interested, so she went over to my aunt. My aunt was a missionary, and she preached all over this country, and she lived in Indiana. So my mother went over there, and my father went with her at the time, but she said, "I don't want to see you anymore." So one day, she heard this skittling on the window, and she looked down, and there he was. He had been throwing stones up the window. He said, "I know how to throw stones so it won't break a window." And then she realized that she missed him more than any other person, and so then they were married.
A pastor's pay wasn't very much.
The church pay was just horrendous. They weren't able to pay. They didn't have the money to pay. So he had at certain times received positions from 2 outstanding businesses. He could have stayed on as a general manager in either place and received a very, very nice pay. However, his heart was in the Lord's work, and so he decided that he would try to get an education and do the Lord's work. The very last position he ever had in the church was in Gilman, Vermont, and the most pay he got for the year 1942 was $1,400. Petitioners gave us food to eat. We were often hungry. Petitioners gave us clothes and things like that, but we managed.
Talk to me about he run a service.
Now, I was very little when he started preaching in different circuits. He had 3 in the first one, and he didn't even have a car. He would take a team that a person nearby had and go to different churches. And I don't know how he ever did it, but he did. For church service at 3 different churches, it's a tremendous amount of work. But he did it. And then finally, the last church he had 2 parishes. And my mother would help him. She went back and got some more education as a minister, and she would help him in the different services. He was a very humorous person. One time he put on a lady's hat and her outfit and went in, and nobody knew it was the minister doing this. He could tell jokes. He was really great. But when it came time to do a service, preach a sermon, he was very, very deeply indebted to the God that he loved so much. And I think it was more that type of service. He would care more about having people understand how much God cares for us.
Your father and your mother's reactions were there?
Of course, they were stunned, as we all were. And he said, I have to go back and help them because I know how to help people today. And he said, I've always been able to help people. When he would go into a church, sometimes people would be unhappy that he was there because they'd loved the minister before. But it wasn't long before everybody loved him. And even to this day, they will tell me how much they loved him, what he meant to them.
Yeah.
He was stunned that they would do such a thing. He was stunned, just as, well, we all were stunned that they could do such a thing.
And his reaction to what he...
To immediately join back into the service and be a minister and help all the men. He said, I've been there, I know what they have to go through, and I know how to help them.
People were joining up.
You know, I don't think that had any effect on him at all, the fact that he was older. Okay. Now, my brother Wyatt was a very strong young man. But my mother heard sobbing one day. She went into the room, and my brother was crying, and he said, I'm never going to see my father again. And that, of course, was an upsetting thing too. So when my brother went into the Marines, we all took him down to the station, and he was going to say goodbye to my father, so he started to shake his hand like a young man would do. Then he threw his arms around his neck and kissed him, which probably was not what a young man would do.
And mother joined the military on the same day?
At the very same time. My brother went first. As soon as he graduated from high school, he went into the Marine Corps. And then my father went through the test to make sure that his health was fine and that he could receive a commission. And everything was fine. And then we went to Boston with him when he went to the chaplain school. And he went to the chaplain school for a month, and then he went down to, we went down to Camp Davis in North Carolina, and he was there a while, and then up to Taunton, to the camp in Taunton, and he came over in January, and my mother and he celebrated their 19th wedding anniversary. Then he walked off into the fog. On the 29th of January, I was 15. 5 days later, the light of my life was gone. down into the ocean, but he gave himself to save others.
What it was like to go back to college?
Yes, he enjoyed himself. He was the most humble person I've ever known, but he was so funny, and he was a joyous person. Everything made him happy, and he was thrilled to be there with these younger people. Thrilled.
And
yes, he would be just being a minister, doing the church service, speaking, and helping others along, because he always helped others. That was his forte.
Now, did chaplains at all, or?
To some extent. Now, I met all of them, and I thought they were all wonderful, wonderful men, and I really enjoyed being with them. And I think he did too, because a lot of him has come through to me.
Right.
That's why I was a church musician, because of him.
Go visit him in the base, and what happened, and who did you meet?
Yes. We went about every 2 weeks to Taunton, and we went out to the base, met my father at the base, and met the other 3 chaplains. And I was just fascinated by them because I thought they were so wonderful. I hadn't known very much about some of the different faiths, and it was like an education for me to really meet them and see how wonderful they were. All 4 were just wonderful. They were wonderful together, and they even joked together, which, my father was a big joker. And I learned a great amount about each man, and I knew more about the Jewish faith than I'd known before. And of course, Father Washington, the Catholic faith, and then I had to study them when I went into Boston University. I had to study all the faiths, and I felt wonderful because I had such a great opportunity to meet them.
And were the other 3 chaplains and your father?
I did. They seemed to be, just totally enmeshed in a great friendship, all of them. They were all really very friendly, and they seemed to have, God spoke to each one of them. God loved them, and they loved God, and that was a turning point right there. They could go down on the ship with their arms around each other and know that God was with them and with the men who were going down.
And his wife or any other family members of the 4 chaplains?
Not at that time.
Right.
I didn't meet them until later on. I traveled all over this country with my mother when she was National Chaplain in American Legion Auxiliary. And I met them at different places, but I hadn't met them before.
So in Camp Miles Standish?
Yes, it was a big bustling base, and there were a lot of soldiers there, and we met some of the soldiers, and we ate there, and we enjoyed being there. For the very first time, I felt that my father would not be back with us. For the very first time. So I just loved him and the others more than I could possibly express.
And any of his services?
No. We were normally there at a time when the services were not being held, so that we could have his full attention.
So,
we would eat at the base.
Right.
They were very nice to us. My mother and I would eat at the base. Do you know that my brother was listed as missing at the same time that my father was lost? And so we were thinking of all the things that...
From meeting with them?
I was 14.
I understand. But when you met them?
I really don't. I think I was focusing so much on my father that I really could not explain how each person affected me. But I liked each one of them, and I did ask a little bit about their marriages or children or whatever had happened. But I really didn't know any more than that.
But they seemed happy to be working together?
They seemed very happy to be together, very happy. In fact, my father had written about how much he enjoyed being with them.
And taking off his own gas mask and putting it on them. Did you know about that?
That is very true.
Tell us about that.
And my mother used to tell me over and over again, he was gassed in World War I, so let's not do anything that would harm him. Yes, he would take off his gas mask and put it on a soldier and carry the soldier off the field with his gas mask on. And so that affected him tremendously. And that happened before his back was broke.
Anything like that ever happened to your...
You know, I think that by the time I was there, he had conquered any problems that he had from being gassed. I don't recall him ever having a cold. I don't recall him ever having flu or anything like that.
Remember?
From World War I?
Yes.
Well, he had his back broken in several places, about 8 different places. So it took him a long time. And I have a notebook filled with pictures of all the different exercises he did to get his back to normal. So it took some time. He was working in a place down on Long Island, not Long Island, Staten Island, and he helped them solve several mathematical problems. So they offered him an extremely good position, being a general manager of their company. I don't remember the company's name at the time. And he said, you know, this is great, but I want to be a minister. And so he went out to Moody Bible Institute and studied there. Just that his whole life he'd been just committed to God and to teaching others and to show people that God really cares for us. And that's why he went. And that's why he stayed in such, you know, at the time they couldn't pay much. But that's why he stayed in these different churches. I don't remember. I know that when the Pearl Harbor happened, he was very upset and stunned, and he said, I just have to go because I know what these men are going through and I can help them. And that's when he started finding out if his health was up to snuff and going back to make sure he could get. Yes, he was. Mm-hmm.
His health was good enough?
His health was good enough.
No residual problems from...
Nothing, no. Even his eyes. In the beginning, he suffered eye problems because of his being gassed and having his back broken. Even his eyes were perfect. Only because the only thing I know is that he wanted to help the men in battle. He was sure that after all he'd done in World War I and been in every one of the French battles, he was sure that he could help them.
Okay.
And that was basically his need.
What the action was?
He said all the time that he felt that he knew what it was like to be there and that he could help the men. And that was his basic reason. He wanted to help men. He always wanted to help people everywhere, but he thought they had a more severe problem going into different battles, and he wanted to help them. And I believe he could, and I believe he did. Even on the boat, when they were sinking, he was praying, and they would be praying.
Sign there?
We knew before he went down because we had to go down too. We went to Wilmington and he went to Miles Standish. But he would come into Wilmington to see us, or we would go out there to visit him. We went. We had our car,
okay.
And he would go with whatever they provided, but my mother and I would go in the car. And we went up to Chicopee, Mass, and my mother got a house there because the government was giving people houses. And I mean, Army people houses. And he went from there to Taunton. And we would go out every 2 weeks to visit him in Taunton. And that is where I met the other three. Yes, he did. He told her immediately.
What did he say?
You know, it's in her book. I wish I had it. I could repeat it from there. He just said that God had now given him the chance to help the men who were there. At that time, they didn't have many women, and they didn't go into battle like they might do today. So it was men, and he could help them.
New York City?
I really don't, but I know that before he went there, he came to Chicopee to see us. So he must have gone on either Westover Air Force Base was there. Maybe he had a ride with someone from Miles Standish to the base. I don't know, but I know that after the wedding anniversary ceremony and all, we waved goodbye, and he walked out through the fog. And he went to where there was a bus. So he took a bus from there.
Did your mother or anybody in your family actually see him in New York before he boarded the Dorchester?
No. When we moved to Chicopee, my mother got a job working, and not a ministerial job, but working at a plant there, helping out, doing things for the war effort. And apparently she was unable to leave. So he walked away into the fog, and that was the last we heard. But he did write back and forth to her, but we never went down to New York. And their anniversary was the 19th, and it wasn't long after that that he left.
To say he was getting on the ship?
I think he probably put it in a letter. Now, I have many of his letters that he wrote in the box in there, but I really didn't have time to look through and see all that information. So I really don't know. I might be able to look it up and see. I'm sure there are many letters.
If you can, that would be fine.
If he find out something about his trip from New York, to New York and from New York, whether she knew anything that was happening. They were they tried to keep things quiet, you know. They didn't want to give you a lot of information about what was happening, and then other people wouldn't know about it. We didn't have any Snowden then.
The Dorchester proceeded up the south shore of Long Island and went up to Canada. Wound up in Jackson Fox was missing.
Yes, I know exactly. We were in one of the bedrooms with the door closed, and we had one of these old-fashioned. It wasn't a record, but we were making a copy for him of all different things that we could send him, telling him how each one of us was feeling and what we were doing. And the knock came on the door. And when we went out to answer it, there was a captain, a colonel, and another person from the service waiting for us. We let them in, they sat down, and they told us he was gone.
What did they tell you?
That the boat had been torpedoed, and that they had gone down on the ship, holding each other, arms around each other, praying with the men, and that was the way their lives were lost. They gave up their vests, their places in the lifeboats, so that others might live.
Now, Chaplain Good's widow, Teresa, who I met some years back, said that she was first informed that he was missing. And it took her several months and some letters of complaint.
We were told by the colonel. He must have come from the base right there, the airport. Westover Field. We were told by him that minute. I believe the date was February 13th.
10 days later.
That he was gone. There was nothing saying he was missing. My brother, on the other hand, was listed as missing at the very same time. We did receive that, but not about my father.
Who told you about what they eyewitnessed?
Absolutely. I don't remember the man's name, but it was down in New Bedford. And they have a Seaman's Bethel Chapel there. And every year they would have a meeting there. And one of the men was on the ship, and he spoke to me at length at how wonderful the men were and how much good it did them to see them praying, to even just speak to them.
The lesson people should learn.
Well, I have to think about it. I have to believe that God engineered everything, that he brought the four men together so that we could know that religions can work together, just like people can work together if they realize that each one of us has something to give. And my father was such a tremendous influence on me. My entire life was lived trying to stand up to everything he believed in. And I believe the other three men were the same way, and their families, I would think, would be the same. Just really, really caring about the world and about people.
At Miles Standish and in other places?
Absolutely. They showed everyone there how people can get along together, how even if you're a different religion, a different race, have different thoughts and feelings, you still can be wonderful to everyone. Yes. It was his dream to go back into the service and go over where the men were having all their troubles, to help them meet each trouble that they had. Each thing. Did the person lose an ear? Did the person do something else? Because war is hell.
Go ahead.
My parents just loved each other unbelievably. If everybody could have that type of relationship, it would be fantastic. They were married 19 years. That's all. I've been married 64 years. They were married 19 years, but they were so happy together. And my mother was a little bit taller than my father. And she could feel it. She'd know I'm a little bit taller. That's all right. You're up there. You're tall. It's okay. They just were fantastic. They loved each other so much.
And
do you know that she probably was not happy with it? In fact, she looked at him once and she told one of my aunts, I can't see him growing old. So right then and there, she might have realized that something was going to happen. But it was his dream to go and help. So she never said a bad thing about it.
last time he came?
The last time he came to us in Chicopee Falls, and they spent 3 wonderful days together. And then when it was time, he said, "Don't drive me over to the bus." He said, "I'll leave you here." And so he walked out through the fog and waved goodbye to us. I watched too. And he walked over to the bus, and then we never saw him again. But he's always been in our hearts. Even now, 70 years after we've lost him, he's in our hearts. And I still live by all the tenets that he believed in. Yes, he didn't have a car at that time, and when he'd gone out to Illinois, he had a Ford, an old Ford, a Model T or a Model something or other. But anyway, that car did not hold up, so he didn't have it anymore, and he would walk or he would borrow a sleigh from a farmer next door and take the horses, and he was a city boy, you know. My mother was a farm girl. he was a city boy, but he always got there. One time, my brother was in the sleigh, and Dad just dropped now this is before I was born. Dad dropped the reins, and the horse went running up the hill. And my mother yelled, but Dad ran after it, caught the reins, and stopped the sleigh.
The American Legion. Well,
Yes.
Talk to me what he would do and how he would help veterans even before he joined up the second.
Yes, he did. And he worked for the FBI, and we didn't even know it. One day my mother heard this talking down in the cellar, and this old man was there, and she said, would you like some food or something? And he says, no, I'm fine. And he left. Dad was working with this old man for the FBI and getting information. And he just helped everybody. If a serviceman were in trouble, if a serviceman were ill, he'd help get him down to White River Junction where there was a place that they could go to be helped. And he just helped everyone.
Why don't you just tell us that story?
One time, one of the parishioners brought in a lot of green beans.
Okay. And then just.
And that was all we had for supper. So my mother cooked the beans and she put them on the table. And she said, Mary, would you like to say grace? And I said, thank you for the beans. Amen.
No,
But there were many times we went hungry. We didn't have the food that we should have had because we couldn't afford it with the pays that he got. And so parishioners would help, but then he would help other parishioners anyway.
The kids, what have you told your kids about?
Oh, probably I've told them numerous stories of his life, of his behavior, of his action in both world wars, and what it means to just remember that you're a child of God and that you need to live the life of God. You need to help everybody you can help. You need to pray. You need to pray for this country that's in bad, bad shape. And they would have been perfect for that. All four of them would show you that life is wonderful, but it's more important to give yourself for God.
Years.
I think people have been just splendid. They have, there are memorials all over this country, and I've been with my mother to the different memorials, and I think that possibly that story has helped more people to understand war and how to behave during a war than most of the stories around. That ship lost more people than any other except the Arizona.